It is the 11th of August, and this day in Baptist history, our reading is another McCoy Memorial. Our passage of Scripture comes from Galatians chapter 3 and verse 8. And the Scripture, foreseeing that God would justify the heathen through faith, preached before the gospel unto Abraham, saying, In thee shall all nations be blessed. The First Baptist Church in the territory of Kansas was comprised of 6 charter members: Mr. David Lewis and his wife, Mr. John Davis, a Creek Indian preacher, and 3 black men, slaves of the Creeks. Actually, the constituent members of that church had traveled with Reverend Isaac McCoy from near what is now Niles, Michigan. Reverend McCoy had established the Carey Station in Michigan in his labor of love among the Indians. Johnston Likens, Reverend McCoy's son-in-law, had labored with his father-in-law in the East, and he accompanied Reverend McCoy west to relocate the Shawnee Baptist Mission in Kansas in 1829. After the first buildings were erected, Mr. Likens returned east to accompany his family westward as well. For 10 years, Mr. Likens served as superintendent and teacher of the mission. He became one of the founders of Kansas City, Kansas, and served as its first full-time mayor. However, the outstanding and enduring work of his life was in connection with the Baptist mission in Kansas. The historic account reads as follows, and I quote, Early in 1832, Reverend McCoy turned his attention to mission work in the Indian Territory. He assisted in the organization of the First Baptist Church in that territory, which was located about 15 miles above Fort Gibson on the Arkansas River. This took place September 9th, 1832. End of quote. A report written to the Board of Managers of the Baptist General Convention reads as follows, and I quote, On the 9th of September, 1832, a church was organized consisting of 6 members. On this occasion, Mr. Lewis preached in the forenoon, and I in the afternoon, and Brother Davis, besides interpreting, prayed and exhorted in both Indian and English. This was a good day to us all. We had no artifice employed to occasion excitement. Nevertheless, we retired from our meeting, not only with solemn countenances, but many faces, both black and red, were suffused with tears, and every heart seemed to be filled. For myself, I felt like seeking a place to weep tears of gratitude to God for allowing me to witness a gospel church formed under such auspicious circumstances in the Indian Territory, toward which we have so long directed our chief attention with deep solitude. End of quote. The following entry was appended in Reverend McCoy's journal upon his return, and I quote, I returned to my family on the 24th of September, 1832. By this time, matters under the management of Mr. Likens have so far advanced that public religious exercises were held in the mission buildings for the benefit of the Shawnees, and a small school of Indians attended. On the departure of some of us from Carey in 1828, our church became so scattered that its meetings were unavoidably omitted. Its first meeting had taken place in Kansas in my late absence at the Shawnee Mission House. Our scattered church, which once met at Carey, now was able to assemble 15 members at the Shawnee Mission House. On the 11th day of August, 2 Delawares were baptized. End of quote. Amazingly, the first of the 2 Delawares to be baptized was Charles Journeycake, who in time became an outstanding Baptist preacher and pastored a church among the Delawares for many years. The church grew rapidly according to McCoy's reports to the board of directors of the mission. He mentioned that in October, upon satisfactory testimony and confirmation of lifestyle, 38 were admitted to baptism and membership. Soon thereafter others followed, and the number of members grew to 63. Interestingly, of that early membership, McCoy lists 12 as natives, 4 as whites, and 42 as Africans. Baptists have been first and have always been foremost among non-Catholic groups in giving the gospel to the American Indians. One cannot read of the Trail of Tears and meditate on the tragic forced march of the Indians from their verdant homelands in the east to the arid, barren land of the west without consternation in the realization of the white politicians' abuse of power and privilege. And yet our Baptist forebears did what they could to get the gospel to the Indian population. Unfortunately, the effort was too little. Today, as we lift up our eyes to the fields of the world in Europe, Asia, Africa, and South America, let us not forget our responsibility to preach the gospel to the American nationals. To God be the glory.